All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the fascinating, highly chaotic, and honestly, deeply misunderstood profile of the homeopathic remedy Tarentula Hispanica. If you've ever dealt with someone who has just relentless hyperactivity, shocking impulsivity, and this desperate, almost painful craving for attention, well, you might have been looking right at a tarantula case. So let's break down the intense internal world of this patient.
Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the nature of tarantula, look at its rhythm and threat response, explore that desperate search for attention, touch on the fascinating use of music as medicine, cover the physical symptoms, and finally, look at some real-world success cases.
Section 1, the nature of tarantula and the foundations of the remedy. So, to really get this, we have to define the restless foundational energy driving the patient. It's mapped by two key things, the tuberculinic miasm and the fifth superclass. The tuberculinic miasm, that gives us the rhythm. It's frantic, hectic. The patient feels like time is literally running out, creating this desperate need to do everything right this second. But why the rush? Well, that's where the fifth superclass comes in. The core sensation there is feeling trapped, cornered, or oppressed, which triggers an overwhelming instinct to escape. They're on high alert, constantly anticipating a threat. Just imagine the absolute physical and mental toll of a nervous system that believes it's constantly cornered with the clock ticking down. Moving on to Section 2, the rhythm and the threat, specifically looking at ambush and deceit. It's truly fascinating how patients actually act out the spider's biological survival tactics. Out in nature, the tarantula doesn't overpower its prey in an open field, right? It waits in hidden burrows for prey to fall into a trap, often striking totally unexpectedly from behind. Clinically, we call this a foxy personality. These patients can be incredibly astute, manipulative, and deceitful. Their outbursts are abrupt, they happen when you least expect them. They might even fake being sick just to manipulate a situation or grab your attention. It's a survival strategy built on hidden traps, not direct confrontation. To really sharpen our understanding here, it helps to contrast tarantula with snake remedies. Both rely on deceit and hidden attacks, but snakes, which sit in the sixth superclass, are more like conspirators. They engage in long-term, calculated destruction. Tarantula, totally different story. It is purely impulsive. It's an immediate, short-term ambush. You're looking at a sudden burst of aggression born out of that intense feeling of being trapped, rather than some deep, slow-burning vendetta. Which brings us to Section 3, the search for attention. This is really the hidden engine behind all of it. Get this striking biological reality. Out in the wild, male tarantulas actually outnumber females 10 to 1. 10 to 1! Think about what that means for survival. It sparks this intense, desperate competition just to be noticed. If the spider doesn't draw attention to itself, it fails to reproduce. It essentially ceases to exist. And that biological necessity perfectly mirrors the psychological desperation in the tarantula patient. They absolutely must be seen, no matter the cost. And that connects to a really foundational concept in the source material. Dr. Patak and Dr. Sankaran note that the core trigger for tarantula isn't necessarily romantic heartbreak. When they say ailments from unrequited love, they're talking about a profound internal feeling of not being good enough or attractive enough to receive essential affection. It can even be a vertical relationship, like a child feeling suffocated by a controlling parent, doubting if the affection is actually real or just a mechanism of control. The patient feels a fundamental deficiency in their ability to connect and be loved. So how does a person who feels fundamentally unnoticed but desperately needs connection actually behave? Well, that deep-seated insecurity gets loud, really loud. You know those kids who drop to the floor screaming in a sudden tantrum but without a single actual tear? Pure theater. They'll wear exceptionally bright warning colors like vibrant reds and oranges to literally force you to look at them. They speak super fast, using massive hyperbole. And if you try to ignore them, they will break something. Yes, it's disruptive, but it's specifically designed to force engagement. Because in their mind, being punished is absolutely better than being invisible. Let's pivot to Section 4, music as medicine, or the paradox of rhythm. Okay, we have to talk about tarantism. Back in the Middle Ages, there was this widespread belief that if you were bitten by a tarantula, the only way to expel that chaotic, toxic venom was through frantic, uncontrollable dancing. Musicians would literally be brought to the town square, and the afflicted would just dance until they collapsed from sheer exhaustion. Now, whether that was a literal cure or just a fascinating case of mass hysteria, it perfectly encodes the energy of the remedy. The poison itself is chaotic rhythm, and the cure requires engaging with that exact same rhythm.
This relationship to music is a massive clinical keynote. But let's compare it to Aurum, which loves highly structured classical or religious music to fulfill its sense of duty. Tarentula uniquely demands the exact opposite: fast, repetitive, incredibly loud DJ beats. We are talking monotonous, primal, thumping rhythms. And here's the craziest part. While blasting that club music might give you or me a splitting headache, for the Tarentula patient, it actually calms their neurological chaos. It organizes their frantic thoughts. You'll literally see hyperactive kids suddenly focus or just immediately start dancing rhythmically the second a fast beat drops.
Part 5. Physical symptoms and uses. Let's ground this psychological abstraction into the physical body. All that mental restlessness we talked about, it maps perfectly to the physical body. The symptoms center heavily on a profound lack of motor coordination. We see extreme neurological dysregulation, things like chorea, tics, involuntary jerking. It's actually a premier remedy for severe restless leg syndrome that causes terrible insomnia. Their body just cannot turn off. Interestingly, we often see something called cross-laterality, like the right arm and left leg acting up at the exact same time. They also suffer from hyperesthesia, meaning they are incredibly hypersensitive to superficial touch, especially along the spine, and to noise. And the cravings? Super peculiar. A strong desire for cold drinks, chocolate, and, get this, burnt toast or even ashes. No joke. Finally, Section 6, Practical Success Cases. Let's look at the real-world application. To see how this actually works in practice, let's compare two totally different success stories. Boy number 1 was 10 years old, hyperactive, constantly disruptive in school, essentially presenting like a severe ADHD case. He loved that loud DJ music and had that highly specific craving for cold Pepsi and burnt toast. After receiving Tarentula, he saw a 90% improvement in both his behavior and physical symptoms. Now, boy number 2 was 12, presenting primarily with nasal allergies and insomnia. But his behavior was the key. He faked illness for attention, and he'd impulsively throw objects over fences just to antagonize people. So both boys, despite entirely different primary complaints, shared that core tarantula profile of impulsive deceit, a craving for attention, and relentless rhythm. And both experienced massive holistic improvements after getting the remedy. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a vital question to think about. Are we dismissing chaotic, disruptive, and manipulative behaviors in patients as just mere rebellion or bad behavior? Or, armed with this understanding, can we look a little closer to see the desperate, hidden plea for connection and unrequited affection that's actually driving the chaos? Tarentula Hispanica teaches us that sometimes the absolute loudest, most aggressive behavior is actually a profound vulnerability, masking a deep, deep fear of remaining invisible. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I really hope this reframes how you look at the hidden depths of systemic chaos.